Let's say I made a video for you and it was about the two-tier justice system in Britain, or the fact that Britain has a broken justice system. Well, you'd probably get bored halfway through because we know that it's true. Say some hurty words online, literally years in prison. Attack an MP, suspended sentence. We know this. We know that the system is broken. So I think a more novel approach is to highlight specific individuals within that system and really kind of name and shame them a little bit. Put them to task for the decisions that they have made. Now, I'm going to do this today specifically with a judge, but it doesn't have to be a judge. It could be politicians. Yeah, plenty of hypocritical politicians about. Could be police chiefs, could be all sorts of people. But this judge really stands out to me, and I think you'll understand why as we go through some of his cases and his court decisions. And his cases that I'll cover go through Nigel Farage, a police officer, a radical trans feminist, and Tommy Robinson himself. So let's get into it. So who am I talking about today? I'm talking about a man named Judge Tan Ikram. And you may know him, you may not know him, but you'll certainly know of some of the cases that he's presided over. And the most recent one was the case of a fans-only worker named Victoria Bowen, who threw a milkshake over Nigel Farage, the politician and leader of one of the main political parties in the UK. Tan Ikram gave her a suspended sentence. Now look, yes, this was only a milkshake, but could it have been something far worse? Well, yeah, I believe it could have been. It could have been acid, for example. You really have no idea. And it's not like we haven't seen MPs in this country be attacked for their political views. I'm talking about Joe Cox and David Amess, who were both unfortunately tragically killed. So I think this is very serious. And even Judge Tan Ikram himself said that this was an affront to British democracy. So how can you pretend to realise how serious this is and yet let this person off with a suspended sentence? Well, I'll come back to this case, and I'll come back to how Victoria Bowen may have wooed and persuaded the judge to let her off because she appealed to the judge's political beliefs. Wait for it. Now, some of you may be wondering to yourself, I've heard the name Tan Ikram, but I can't quite place it. And it's probably from another recent high-profile case that he oversaw or judged on, right? For those of you who don't know, on October 7th, there was an attack into Israel. People paraglided in and they did some absolutely horrific things. That's kind of undisputed, right, amongst rational, sane minds. Two people at a protest in London were seen wearing paraglider emblems on their backpack, a very obvious show of support to that terror organisation. This eventually made its way to court, and who were they sat in front of? Well, it was none other than Tan Ikram. Tan Ikram decided that they should have a suspended sentence. Yes, it was very naughty, and yes, they were being charged with a terror offence, but no jail time. Emotions were running very high over this issue. Now, this was long before Israel had even gone into Gaza. So this wasn't a rejection of some actions that Israel had taken after that attack. This was literally just very obvious, clear support of a terror organisation. But that, for Tan Ikram, doesn't merit any kind of jail time. Compare and contrast this to some of the sentences that have been given to other people, particularly over the riots, for social media posts, some of which they very quickly deleted and things like that. It's absolutely shocking that this was deemed to be so insignificant that they get no jail time. It blows the mind. Now, the plot actually thickens when it comes to Judge Tan Ikram, because after he'd given these two suspended sentences for terror offences, as crazy as that sounds, someone looked on his LinkedIn profile and they noticed something interesting. Judge Tan Ikram, well, he's been liking a lot of anti-Israel content on his LinkedIn. And what was his answer? Oh, that must be a mistake. I don't know how that could possibly have happened. Butterfingers. Yeah, I find that pretty unlikely. So clearly we now have a politicised judge here in the UK handing out politicised judgment. Absolutely shameful for our justice system. How that didn't lead to a retrial for those two who got suspended sentences, I will never know. And it brings me back to another point. It brings me back to Victoria Bowen and how she managed to get away with such a light sentence. And I think she did something that was actually quite clever. She might be the smartest fans-only model that you've ever seen, because when she went into court that day, she had a little lapel badge on. And what did she put on there? a pro-Palestine flag. So she walks into court. I can't believe, by the way, that political badges and things like that are actually allowed in courtrooms. Maybe they're not, but Judge Ikram wasn't going to tell her to take it off, that's for sure. So she walks into court with this pro-Palestine badge on, and yeah, she walks away with a suspended sentence for attacking the leader of a major political party in the UK. How utterly insane is that? This guy really is a piece of work. I find that absolutely shameful and so obvious and so brazen. How are we actually just letting this happen in the UK? It's madness. Now look, you might not be convinced by this point that Judge Ikram was acting with bias when he made his judgments. So let me give you a thought experiment. Someone is standing before Ikram in the court and they're accused of, and they are guilty of, having thrown a milkshake over Sadiq Khan. What do you think Judge Ikram is going to do in this case? I think we all know the answer. He's going to throw the book at them. He's going to use the full weight of the law against that person. They are definitely getting a custodial sentence. They're going to jail. And the fact that you and I both know that that is true, ostensibly true, just goes to show that he was acting with bias when he made these judgments. He was using his own political beliefs to imprint that onto the law. The law is meant to be blind, but I guess in the case of Ikram, it's not. Okay, so look, another quick story before I get into the juicy one. Just this year, a few months ago in May actually, there was a police officer who was arrested for and convicted of assault by Judge Ikram. And here's what happened. A black lady had stepped off a bus and the police had accosted her, wanting her to tap her Oyster card and prove that she had paid for the bus fare, right? Kind of strange, the sort of thing we probably should come to expect in a low trust society these days. Now, she didn't really want to stop for the police and she actually sort of tried to walk off, and PC Lathwood grabbed her arm and then she kept sort of struggling a little bit, not really if I'm being completely honest, and he eventually placed her under arrest, saying he didn't want her to walk into the road and get hit by a car. Fine. Now, I don't think the police should have arrested her for that, especially as it turns out she had paid for her bus fare, so her minor resistance kind of makes even less sense. But nevertheless, PC Lathwood was then taken to court, charged with assault, and subsequently convicted. Think about what that does to a police officer's career, being convicted of assault. It's probably career ending. I'm not 100% sure, and maybe I should have done a bit more research to find out what eventually happened to this guy in the end. But very recently, it was found, I think just a couple of days ago, it was taken to the Court of Appeal and the appeal was overturned. It was described as erroneous and perverse. And this is a judgment that, yes, Ikram had made. Absolutely crazy. Look, I don't think the arrest should have been made, right? I really don't, and it wasn't great. Is it assault? No, it's not assault, come on. Well, brace yourself, because this next story is crazy and it just keeps getting crazier. Last year, in August of 2023, a trans rights activist named Sarah Jane Baker was addressing a rally of people. And she said, if you see a TERF, punch them in the F-word face.
I was going to come here and be really fluffy and be really nice and say, yeah, be really lovely and queer and gay. No, if you see a TERF, punch them in the fucking face.
Now that, to me, and to you probably, is a very clear incitement to violence.
Under arrest on suspicion of inciting violence. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. Okay.
Trans rights are human rights, one struggle, one fight.
She ends up, for this, in court, standing in front of Judge Ikram. Now, it's very clear that she did say this. It was live streamed. The evidence is all there. For some reason, she pleaded not guilty, and for an even more mysterious reason, although I have my speculation, Judge Ikram agreed with her. She's not guilty of inciting violence. Absolutely insane. Now, is Sarah Jane just someone who slipped up and made a little mistake and said the wrong thing whilst addressing a crowd? Maybe the adrenaline got to her and she said something a bit foolish. No, and trust me, this story gets really crazy, but even just a few months before, she'd held up a placard at a rally that said, "Kill J.K. Rowling." She'd made the sign herself. J.K. Rowling obviously being one of those TERFs that she wants you to go and punch in the face. Okay, now Sarah Jane's story actually runs way deeper than that. You see, decades ago, Sarah Jane was arrested and put in prison for kidnapping and torturing her stepmother's brother. How crazy is that? Whilst Sarah Jane was in prison, she was sentenced to an additional 2 decades for the attempted murder of her cellmate. So to those of you who would dismiss this as, well, you know, just someone with a bit of a loud mouth saying silly things at protests, not actually seriously a violent person, well, boy, are you wrong. This is probably someone that you should take very, very seriously when they start making threats of violence, because they've done it multiple times in the past and spent 3 decades in prison for those crimes. Absolutely crazy. So how, knowing who Sarah Jane is, how exactly did she manage to convince Judge Ikram not to send her to jail? In fact, to give her a not guilty verdict. Crazy. Well, she said something in court that I think may have swung the balance. She said, the only people suffering more than us, transgender people, are the migrants. Thank God I'm not a transgender migrant. I genuinely believe that when she said that, she won over the heart of Ikram and he gave her a not guilty verdict. In the end, he said, oh, you weren't serious, you were just trying to draw attention to your cause. Yeah, what kind of positive attention does calling for violence actually give your cause? Most causes that we in the West think of as political legitimate causes aren't actually aided by calls for violence, right? Someone put a big tree in the way and I need a haircut. You don't need to tell me in the comments that I need a haircut, because I know. I tried to get one yesterday in town and the only places doing walk-ins were Turkish barbers. So I just thought, I'll just let it grow out till after Christmas. And this is what you're stuck with. It's why I usually wear a baseball cap. Anyway, Tommy Robinson. Has Tommy Robinson had a run-in with Judge Ikram? Oh boy, yes he has. Tommy Robinson, I think this was 2 or 3 years ago now, an article was written about him in a newspaper, and he wasn't given the right to reply to the statements that were made in that newspaper. So Tommy, being Tommy, a little bit boisterous, right? He went to the author of that article's house and he rang their doorbell and he was saying, look, you need to come out here and give me my right to reply. That ended up going to court and he was convicted of, or he got some kind of like stalker ban. Ikram said that he was stalking this person, despite the fact he'd only been to their house literally once, right? Absolutely crazy. He didn't go to prison for it or anything like that. That actually shocks me. I suspect if there was any way that Ikram could have sent Tommy to jail, he would have. I'm sure of it. Absolutely sure of it. Let me know what you make of this strategy. The strategy of highlighting one specific person within the justice system and going over some of the actions that they have actually done in their lifetimes over their career. In the case of Ikram, I only went back, 2 or 3 years, right? There's probably a lot more in there to be found, which is crazy. I think this is really powerful, and here's why. Because when we criticise the justice system, or when we say there's two-tier justice, of course we are telling the truth, right? That is correct. But what it doesn't do is force any particular individual to take accountability for their own actions. Nobody wants to be named and shamed, right, for anything. It's quite a tough thing to have to go through. If you are willing to do that, it takes quite a lot of courage and integrity. So by specifically picking out people who we think have really behaved quite terribly and are abusing their positions of power, I think that's way more powerful. It doesn't have to be judges. It could be police chiefs, it could be solicitors, it could be politicians. And look, I would really love it if people react well to this video and think, hey, there's actually a lot of merit in that. That makes a lot of sense. We should be doing more of this, you know, highlighting specific bad actors. Well, if people enjoy that, I really would love in the comments for people to leave the names of other people that they think are as bad as or worse than Ikram. I mean, on the scale of terribleness, I'd probably give this guy like an 8 out of 10. I think there are ways that actually this guy could be even worse, and I am genuinely sure that there are more, even worse people within our justice system and within our political system. So yeah, please leave comments. I think this is actually way more powerful. It forces people to take account of their own actions, and there's no hiding. They can't hide behind the justice system. You're not comparing one of their judgments with someone else's judgment. You're literally just looking at their own actions specifically. There is nowhere for them to hide. Also, even if you don't have the names of judges or politicians or anything that you want me to look into, please do still comment. I'll try and reply to all of the comments. Sometimes I do miss some. It's quite hard to juggle with your spare time making videos and replying to all the comments, but I really do the best job that I can. If I have ever left you hanging, then I'm really sorry. But yeah, please leave a comment, like, subscribe, especially subscribe if you're not already. It really helps the channel, and it just helps me stay a little bit motivated to keep going and keep making these videos, I suppose. So yeah, till the next one.